Hi everybody, it's Maya Zahira here, and we are now starting video 3 of module 24. And in this module, we're focusing on special populations. In this video, we're focusing on working with different kinds of animals, doing Reiki with different kinds of animals. So I have a lot of notes on this. Remember that everything that you've learned so far about Reiki, about energy, about chakras, about hand positions, all of that applies to animals. Okay, so by animals, I'm including all kinds of animals. So dogs, cats, birds, horses, smaller animals like rabbits, mice, ferrets, hamsters, fish, etc., farm animals, and wildlife. Okay. So most people, when they think of animal Reiki, they think of working on pets like dogs and cats, but you can use Reiki on any of these kinds of animals. And we're going to go over how to do that. We're also going to start with some basics on how to work with animals, basic information, and then I'll get into some of the specific animals. So first of all, the hand positions that you've learned, you might not be able to do all of them. For example, if an animal is in a cage or a tank, then you won't be able to do hands-on, right? Can't do hands-on Reiki on a fish. So you're going to do it outside of the tank or outside of the cage. And you're going to have to experiment with either doing long distance session or doing in person but hands off. Or in some cases, you'll be able to actually do hands-on. On the safety of your animal, the animal, and your safety are important. So if you're working on someone else's animal or even your own, and they're showing indications that they don't like it, then make sure that you listen. You're actually wanting to gain trust with that animal, and they need to know that if they give an indication that they don't want it, then you need to listen and gently back off. Okay. If with the hand positions that you already know how to do from your Reiki 1, just know that the smaller the animal is, so let's say you're working on like a really small cat or a kitten or a puppy that's really, really small, or some other small animal, you're of course going to be using fewer hand positions. And, maybe only 1 or 2 or 3 hand positions, because their body is so small, your hand is going to cover most of their body. So you're not going to need to worry about doing a whole bunch of hand placements in that case. Also, you're going to follow your intuition. Sometimes you're going to end up doing a whole bunch of hand positions, hands on or hands off, or sometimes your hands are only going to be in one position for the entire treatment because that's what the animal wants. And they show you, they snuggle up, and when you try to move your hand, they take their paw and they move your hand right back, for example. And so just listen to that. You don't have to force any certain protocol that you have to move to the next position. Just let them lead the way. They'll give you signals if you pay attention to them. So if you have your hands on one position for the entire time, then just know that the energy will go where it needs to, and it's all perfect. You'll also need to be really flexible about the length of time for the treatment. Even if you've scheduled a professional paid treatment that's supposed to be an hour, and after 20 minutes, the animal is done and wants to run away, or acts like it doesn't want it anymore, if it does move across the room, you actually can send it Reiki across the room. You don't have to be right next to it. So also just knowing that with a lot of animals, you're not going to be able to be right close to it. You might have to be across the room because that's all it can handle. Or that animal might give you the indication that it is totally done and it does not want more. And so then the session's done. Okay, so you'll have to be super flexible, very flexible about how you do the session, hands on, hands off, how close you are. you might be right next to the animal. It might want to come and sit on your lap or sit next to you, or it might not want to get anywhere near you, and you might have to send it Reiki from all the way across the room or from the next room. So go with the flow, okay? Just a little note about the chakras. It's believed that the animals have chakras just like human beings, and that they are similar to that they are set up similarly to human beings. So what you've learned about the human energy system and your chakras and your aura would apply also to your cats, your dogs, your gerbils, your birds, and all of that. So like here above the top of the head would be the crown chakra, etc. Okay. Okay, so that's about the chakras. So there's a couple of other little tips that I'll share. The first thing is that you could choose to either before the session or when you arrive, sit down and go into meditation, closing your eyes for a few minutes and just inviting that pet to come into your consciousness and communicate with the animal. So this is getting into a little bit of animal communication, which is different skill than Reiki. But you can just sit in a quiet meditation and gently call that animal in. If it wants to come into your consciousness, it will. If it doesn't want to, it won't. You can even imagine that you're out somewhere where the animal might enjoy, like an open field or a forest or something like that. And you sit and communicate very gently with that animal. Let the animal know that it's totally safe and that you'd like to share some Reiki with it if it wants it. And then you might receive an inner knowing that the animal either wants it or doesn't want it. Okay. And if it doesn't want it, then you follow that and don't force doing a Reiki session. What you can also do when you do this tuning in meditation is if you feel like the animal is open to it and you've also gotten permission from the owner, you can send a few minutes of Reiki ahead of time before the session, which will help the animal to be more calm and receptive when you come to the session. And speaking of coming to the session, 99.99% of the time, if you are doing Reiki on someone else's pet, you are going to go to their location. Most animals, as you know, have some level of anxiety when they are brought to another location. So you want to work with them at their home where they're comfortable. So let's see. So here's some tips on getting started for an in-person session. First of all, animals are very sensitive. They're very sensitive to energy and they're very sensitive to emotions. So you will want to make sure that you are very calm and very balanced before you start working on them. If not, it's going to make them anxious. So before walking into the session, maybe when you're still out in your car, you'll want to just sit and breathe and center and ground and calm. Maybe do some Reiki on yourself for a couple of minutes and make sure that you are in a really good energy before you enter the animal space. Okay. Next, you'll want to make sure that you don't approach the animal quickly. So what's recommended is that you enter the room and you stand across from the room and you can send Reiki from across the room. Just send Reiki for a few minutes. And then when if it seems like the animal is comfortable with that through their behavior, if they're just sitting there, or even if they come over to you, they're definitely liking the Reiki. or if they start to fall asleep, or any indications that they're just relaxing and chilling, you can try coming a few feet closer and then do some Reiki across the room from that point. And then you'll want to get, if everything seems okay, then you'll want to get even to where you're a couple of feet away from the animal, and you can stand or sit and just gently send Reiki through the palms of your hands to the animal. You can speak softly and gently to the animal, calling it by name. And then if the animal seems receptive to it, you can go all the way up to the animal very, very slowly and just sit next to the animal. And from that point, you would start with hands off. And you'll want the owner to be present. If it's a cat or a dog or it's an animal that's accustomed to being touched, you could even have the owner start to pet the animal, and then you might pet the animal slowly. So again, you get the idea that you want to have a very slow and careful approach, just to make sure that the animal is totally comfortable and that you're not just coming in like a bull in a china shop and just forcing your energy on them. So if at any time you get indications that they are not comfortable, or maybe a dog starts to growl or something, then that means that's a big sign they don't like it, and they need to know that they can trust you, that you are going to honor what they are comfortable with. So if they growl and you honor that and you back off and you end the session, then they might be more open the next time, because they know that you will honor what they're wanting, if that makes sense. You can always try another time. Most animal sessions, most people do charge, most practitioners do charge for animal sessions. And so as opposed to working in the clinical and hospital settings. So you can actually charge just like you would for a regular person client. And you'll want to make sure that you also honor yourself by adding some kind of surcharge on for miles that you're driving. That's really important. And your wear and tear on your car and your time are valuable. So be sure to add something to your cost there. If you're not wanting to charge and you're just wanting to get some practice or work on some friends' pets, you can most certainly do that. But you'll want to follow all of the advice that I've given so far about safety and making the comfort of the pet the highest priority. Okay. So at the end of the session, you'll know that the session is done either when the time is up, or if the animal pushes you away or gets up and leaves, then that's also an indication that the session is done. Just follow the animal's wishes. Okay, so let's talk about some specific animals, and I'm going to go through a few things about each animal here. So about dogs, you'll want to make sure that you're focusing on safety. There are a lot of dogs out there that if they feel threatened, they might bite or nip at you. So keep safety in your mind. Just because you're doing Reiki, this wonderful thing, the animal might not even know what that is. So focus on safety. Make sure that the owner is present. You might need to work on the dog while they're in a kennel, and that's okay too. With a dog, you're generally going to begin at the top of its head and do your hand positions down the body, or just follow your intuition. There's no right or wrong on the hand positions. For cats tend to be more independent, but they also love Reiki. So if they don't come and sit in your lap, don't take it personally. They do tend to be independent, so you might be sending them Reiki from across the room. Some people have more than one cat, so if they have 2 or 3 or more cats, you can send Reiki to, all of the cats in the room. But if there's a cat that's having particular issues, and this applies for all of the animals that you could work on. If there's a cat that's having issues, some kind of health or anxiety or any kind of other issues, and they're the one that's needing Reiki, you'll probably want to put them in a separate room, because if you don't, then whichever animal or animals are more dominant, they'll come up and ask for Reiki, and the ones who really need it won't end up getting what they need. So keep that in mind for working on group. If there's one animal that's needing Reiki, but there's more than one animal in the room, you might need to separate the animals. For birds, of course, they're probably going to be in a cage. Some people do take their birds out, so I would still recommend hands off for a bird session. And you also don't want to put your hands right on the cage. That can kind of freak birds out a little bit. So you'll have your hands a little bit away from the cage, from the edges of the cage. In working with birds, oftentimes people have more than one bird in a cage, and that's fine. You don't have to have them go out and buy a second cage just for the Reiki session. One cage is fine. And then some birds do like to be held, so you can hold the bird, have it sit in your hand if it approaches. If it approaches you and it wants to get into your hand, otherwise just do hands off, okay? With horses, it's recommended that you really only do Reiki on horses if you are already accustomed to working with horses. If you have never been around horses before and you have no clue, it's probably best if you start by doing Reiki on some other animals. And then create some personal opportunities for yourself to, maybe go and get horseback riding lessons or something like that, where you can learn about the social behavior of horses. It's a little different than your other pets. If you do choose to do Reiki sessions with horses, make sure that you use a really soft voice. Approach them with a soft voice. Approach them from the front and the side, but never from behind, because that will spook them. Don't ever use food as an incentive for them to receive Reiki. You want them to receive Reiki just because they want to receive it. If you give them food, they're going to be spending the whole time thinking about how they can get more food from you. That's just how they operate. The horse can be tied up, or it can be held by the owner. If there's, again, if there are several horses in a stall, probably the dominant one is going to want to come up and get Reiki from you. So you might have to separate the horse that's needing the healing energy. You'll have to separate it and put it in a different stall, a different area. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about smaller animals, so that you can do Reiki on rabbits, mice, ferrets, hamsters, fish, etc. And there's not much to tell here, except for that with really small animals, you're not going to be able to do the hand positions, obviously, or just do one hand position for if you've got a small rabbit, there's maybe going to be 1 or 2 hand positions. If the animal is in a fish tank, if it's a fish in water, then you're going to be sending Reiki into the fish tank toward the fish. You can also Reiki the water, which happens inadvertently when you're sending Reiki to the tank anyway. But sending Reiki to the water has a secondary beneficial effect on all of the fish who are swimming through the water. And again, a reminder that if you are working on any kind of animal that's in a cage, don't put your hands like right on the cage. That can make the animal kind of nervous. So you can back away and send from maybe a foot or 6 inches from the cage, and that would be much better. Okay, so farm animals. Farm animals, a lot of them are not used to being around humans like pets. So keep that in mind. A lot of them are just not used to being around people. So most of your work is probably going to be hands off or from further away, like maybe on the other side of the fence from where they are. And you'll want to be careful and put your safety first so that you don't get stepped on or they don't get spooked and start, a whole herd of cattle starts running because they get scared and you get knocked over. So just keep your safety in mind. Stand wherever you know that if they get spooked, you're not going to get run into. Okay. So again, you're probably going to be sending distant Reiki from across the field or on the other side of the fence with most farm animals. However, it's on a case-by-case basis, so you can talk with the farmer and they can actually walk with you into a pen or a stall and help you acclimate with certain animals and sit with you as you send Reiki to whatever animals need it. Okay. And then with wildlife, you can also send Reiki to wildlife, which is kind of cool, but it is wildlife. So you definitely don't want to do hands-on Reiki working with wildlife. You're probably going to be sending it either across the way. So you're using your hands and just sending it across the forest or across the field or where up into the tree or whatever it is that you are, wherever the animal is that you're sending to, but you want to be at a safe distance and use your prudent judgment depending on what kind of animal it is, whether you should be scooting out of there. If it's a dangerous animal, don't stick around. You can just do a traditional long distance Reiki session. Like if you see a bobcat or something that's injured, get out of there and then go home or go to some safe spot and do a traditional long distance Reiki session where you're using the paper technique or the visualization technique or something like that. Okay, so all of this is common sense, but just reiterating that for you. One of the places where I used to live, there were a lot of deer that came out that would walk through all of our backyards. And there was one that I could tell had an injured leg and he was limping pretty bad. And so he was way at the end of the property and I was right by the house when I saw this deer. And so I just started sending, every time I would see it with its other brothers and sisters, I would, almost every day when I would see it, I would send Reiki out my hands and just send healing intention to the animal's leg. And I don't know if it helped or not, but I noticed that within a week he wasn't limping anymore. So he seemed pretty okay. So you can send it all the way across a field or a forest and it works. Okay. So I've talked in general about about working with animals, but there are some organizations that you can work with as well. So if you want to work with instead of just pets or farm animals, you can actually sign up to work at an animal shelter or with some kind of wildlife organization. And so in those cases, you would then be dealing with some red tape and some administration. But I believe in you, and I know that you can create some kind of notebook information and show up in a very professional capacity and schedule an appointment with whoever's in charge and bring your information with you about what Reiki is and what it does and how it can benefit the particular animals at that place, and maybe even the staff members if you feel like that would apply as well. So if you're if you're volunteering at an animal shelter, actually let me back up and say most of the time working at an animal shelter or a wildlife organization, it's going to be volunteer. So you'd be going in and volunteering your time. And at an animal shelter, you might be working on sending Reiki to the animals from outside of their cages, or if the administration there approves of it, then you can, when the animals come out for playtime, then you might be able to do Reiki and like play with the animals and that sort of thing. So most of the time at the animal shelters, the staff tends to be a bit overextended, and because they do tend to depend on volunteers, they tend to be understaffed and kind of stressed out, and so you'll want to make sure that you are not putting any stress on them at all, that you're actually making it easier for them, that you stay out of the way, that you don't worry about how their organization is being run or anything like that, that you just focus on doing what you're there for, which is to give Reiki to the animals. Okay. And then if you're volunteering at a wildlife organization, then of course you're going to have to follow the rules of the administration, whoever's in charge there. And depending on the animal, you might be allowed to do hands-on. Most of the time you're going to be doing hands-off. At a wildlife organization, they might have animals brought in that have been injured and are recovering, and then you can help with the recovery time and helping the animal get well more quickly so it can be released out into the wild. Okay, so that is it for animals, working with animals. And if you have any questions at all about working with that population, then just let me know. And of course, with any of these populations that I've talked about, if you get out there and you start volunteering or working with any of these populations, please go ahead and share with me. Let me know how it goes. And, maybe any issues that arise that you figure out how to resolve. Sharing that will actually help me to assist other people who are wanting to work with that population as well. So as we share together, we help each other. Okay, so we are done with working with special populations, and in the next video we're going to talk about leadership training for healers. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.